والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما رب العالمين. Last time we stopped at the authors saying فأهل الحق وهم أهل السنة والجماعة طلبوا الحق من الله تعالى فهداهم الله وعصمهم عن الضلالة. So last thing we talked about was the distinction that the author made, rahimahullah, between the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah and the people of division, or the people of bid'ah in general. So he says that Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and this is, I thought we will reintroduce this again because it's so important, the difference of how a person is guided or not. Because you actually are responsible by how you seek this guidance, by how you turn away from it. The tools that you're using or not using will determine eventually what end you reach. So when he says, Ahlul Sunnah, Ahlul Haqq, where did they seek the truth from? They asked it from Allah Azza wa Jal, meaning their reliance, their tawakkul is on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what they wanted to find was the truth itself. So that is and how a person of knowledge is supposed to be, a seeker of knowledge, yani talibul ilm in general. But also every human being who is looking for the truth should be looking for the truth no matter where the truth guides them. Now this is really easier said than done. Because often in discussions, right, with people, in any subhanallah, type of discussion or any field, political, economic, scientific, whatever it is, every person has a hawa. Every person has a particular desire for what he wants the outcome to be, isn't it? Like if I've studied in a particular university with a particular professor in a particular field, I'll always favor that field over other fields. I don't like anybody to diminish them because by diminishing them, I'm diminished as well. So I don't like for that to be. If I've chosen a particular book or I've read a particular book, I would have a special affinity to it. So I don't like anybody to say that this book is irrelevant or this book is not as good as any other book because I'll always have this particular bias. So it's not an easy thing to get rid of that bias and say, I'm just seeking the truth for Allah's sake. Because you have your own nafs that is working against you, not for you, but working against you. That tells you in a hidden way, no, this is not good, pick this one. And that's why you find that a lot of people, when they get into discussions, again, this is not only about Islamic discussions, it's about any type of discussion. Again, an election is coming up. You can look how people get very polarized on both ends, as if they are not listening to each other. And in fact, they're not listening to each other. Because everybody is very entrenched in their own ways, and they're very biased. So they stop considering facts. That's why you say that facts have become subjective. Facts really are not subjective. Fact is supposed to be a fact. But what is subjective? How we look at them, and how we interpret them, and how we like and dislike certain facts. So when you like a certain fact, what do? When you dislike it? You can ignore it, or you start reinterpreting it or downplaying what it means. And when you like a particular fact, what do? If it's a fact, right? You start exaggerating it. So this is what is problematic in whatever discussion you have, and especially it becomes really, really problematic religiously. Because then apparently in a religious discussion, in a religious pursuit, what are you looking for? The truth. This is what it looks like. But in reality, we may not be looking for that. I have a particular group, or I have a particular madhab, or I have particular whatever, and I want that to be right. So I'm looking for evidence to support it, and I'm looking for evidence to champion that and to defeat the other opinion. So and similar also with the adab of looking for fatwa, is not to look, and again, this is, I know we can talk about it, I can mention it, but whether it's me or whether it's you, it's very difficult, right? When you're looking for a fatwa, not to be biased towards a fatwa that favors what you already want. I want this to be halal, so I'm looking for this thing. And with that, sometimes without you knowing it, what do? You get attracted to this. You think that, well, it's really, I've chosen it based on evidence, but it was not chosen based on evidence. It's chosen because you wanted it to be this case. How do you rid yourself of that? First, by asking Allah Azza wa Jal for support. And Ya Allah, give me power against my hawa. Give me power against my own desire, my own weaknesses, so that I'm actually looking for the truth itself. So by asking Allah Azza wa Jal, that's the first. The second thing is to re-examine your position. to find out why is it that I've chosen this. Is it actually based on evidence? And to consider, right, I'm talking about matters of ijtihad here, right? Matters where there's illegitimate disagreement. And to try to adopt the other position, at least mentally, adopt the other position and see, if I were to be on the other side, how would I see things differently? How would this evidence, matter or not matter? So, Ahlul Sunnah, they sought the truth, and they sought that truth from Allah Azza wa Jal, so Allah guided them and protected them from error. The people of falsehood, they admired their opinions and they admired their mind. So their tawakkul is not on Allah. Their tawakkul is not on what? Their own self. My own mind. So my mind will tell me what is right and what is wrong. And of course, when a person relies on something other than Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah leaves him to what he had relied on. And if a person decides, and again, I'm going to keep emphasizing this, it is not only about religion, but about anything else. So if there's any scientific pursuit, whatever, investigation, if a person only is reliant on their own mind, they may get some, but they may lose some. And they lose some because they just simply are trusting their own minds. And they admire their own minds, and they can think that their minds can reveal the entire truth. So he says, وَطَلَبُ الْحَقَّ مِنَ الْمَخْلُوقِ الْعَاجِزِ وَهُوَ الْعَقْلِ. So they are seeking the truth from the helpless creation. And that is the mind. So the mind, ultimately is a creation as well. And because it's creation, he says, لأن العقل لا يدرك جميع الأشياء كالبصر, because the mind cannot comprehend everything, just like sight. Just like you cannot comprehend everything with any organs that Allah Azza wa Jalla had given you. The same thing, your mind is just what is part of you, cannot comprehend everything. فإنه لا يبصر جميع الأشياء, cannot see everything. فحجبوا وعجزوا عن معرفته وضلوا وأضلوا. So they were denied the truth because they relied on themselves. So this is the deification of the mind, or the deification of anything else. So either you have Allah Azza wa Jal, who is the ultimate in knowledge, and you seek knowledge from Him, and then after that you investigate, or you deify whatever it is that you trust, whether it's your own mind. This is, I only believe in my own mind and what it tells me, your own senses, or you deify another person or another discipline and say, I'll trust this person no matter what he tells me, or this discipline no matter what they tell me. Right? So, فَالْعَمَلُ بِالْعَقْلِ أَوَّلًا. So the way that he says you're supposed to use your mind, أن يعرف عجز نفسه, that you recognize the limitations of your own self, the limitations of your own mind. And if somebody is guided to this, he is guided to a lot of wisdom and a lot of good. When you know your own limitations in personal, and limitations when it comes to human beings. Personal, okay, I know this, but I don't know that. So I'll talk about this, but I cannot talk about that. I don't know everything. Even if someone tries to push you or to claim that you know everything. Says, I know this, but I don't know this particular thing. So you know the limitations of your own self, and then also you recognize the limitations of humans around you, that even if they all gather, you're not going to be able to know everything. There's always a limit to what you know. فَإِذَا عَرَفَ عَجْزَ نَفْسِهِ, if you know your own weakness and limitations, you know the power of Allah Azza wa Jal. That is, there's this common saying that it says, he who knows himself knows the Creator. Right? If you know yourself, you know the Creator. How? Because He's the opposite. You're limited, He's unlimited. You're ignorant, He is all-knowing. So if you know your own limitations, you know that you can't create, then there's a Creator. You can't fashion, you cannot predict the future, you cannot organize this universe. So the opposite of you is who? The Creator. Someone who can do what you cannot do. So what the one who goes beyond your limitations and all human limitations is Allah Azza wa Jal. So if you know yourself, you know the Creator. That's what it means. If you know yourself, you know the Creator. So, and he does not trust himself, does not trust his mind. بل يتوكل, he trusts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeks the truth from Him. وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ وَيَهْدِهِ إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. If he relies upon Allah, Allah will be sufficient for him. will be sufficient for him, and Allah will guide him to a straight path. So Allah will be sufficient for him in everything. So in matters of rizq, Allah will be sufficient for him. If he trusts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completely, then in addition to that, he does what he needs to do in terms of, securing his provisions, right? His sustenance. So he trusts Allah, Allah will be sufficient for him there. If he trusts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in finding the truth, Allah will lead him to it. If he trusts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in pursuing knowledge, then Allah Azza wa Jal will guide him to it. And of course, there's a difference between trusting Allah and not doing anything but claiming to trust Allah. Of course, we understand. Hopefully you understand this. To trust Allah Azza wa Jal means that you put all your trust in Allah, but then you do what Allah has commanded you to do, which is you travel to seek knowledge, you sit with people and you learn from them and you memorize, because you're not going to simply become a scholar simply by wishing it or saying, I trust Allah. Just like you're not going to be able to pay your rent by saying, I trust Allah, that Allah is going to give me money. Then you're not going to be able to pay your rent or buy your food. So trusting Allah, of course, doesn't contradict seeking and working hard. But then you don't trust your effort. You don't trust your efforts. Your effort is a key. So if I'm trying to seek knowledge, I can read this book 100 times. I may not understand it. But I trust Allah Azza wa Jal, meaning I read it, but before I read, I say, Ya Allah, grant me the ability to understand. Grant me the ability to remember. Grant me the ability to benefit from what I read. So I'm just me, or I'm smart. I'm intelligent. I'm going to grab everything that is in this book and I'll be able to benefit from it. And I'm going to put the effort, but I will trust Allah Azza wa Jal before and in the middle and after. So you always put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not in anything else. Then he says, وَمَنْ كَانَ لَهُ مَالٌ كَثِيرٌ فَلَا يَبْخَلْ وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَتَعَوَّذَ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الْبُخْلِ قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أي داء أدوى من البخل. It says, and if he has a lot of money, and of course the author jumps, he says something and he jumps to something else and then he goes back to it. So it's not all really continuous, but it's beneficial inshallah. So he says, and if he has a lot of money, let him not be stingy, and let him seek Allah's protection from stinginess. And the Prophet ﷺ says, and this hadith is authentic, أَيُّ دَاءٍ أَدْوَى مِنَ الْبُخْلِ. What disease is more severe than stinginess? What disease is worse than stinginess? So this is in reference to once like a tribe or delegation of a tribe came to the Prophet ﷺ. So he asked them, "Man sayyidukum? Who is your head? Who is the head of your tribe?" They said so and so. إِلَّا أَنَّ نُبَخِّلُهُ. Except that he is stingy. We could believe him to be stingy. So the Prophet ﷺ says, and what disease is more severe than stinginess? How could he be your head while stingy at the same time? No, your head is so and so. So that this, the Prophet ﷺ saw as undermining the position of someone. That if you are stingy, you don't deserve to be a head. So here, the author is talking about what? That if a person has a lot of money, spend it fi sabilillah. Especially here, in seeking knowledge. Whether it is in pursuit of it for yourself or in supporting the people of knowledge, don't be stingy with it, but spend it. Because this is also could be considered jihad fi sabilillah. When you support your pursuit of knowledge, so your pursuit of knowledge is jihad fi sabilillah. Or somebody else's pursuit of knowledge, that also is jihad fi sabilillah. And sometimes that's even better than physical jihad. And physical jihad with the sword, with weapons, that sometimes is better than the physical jihad itself, depending on who's doing it and the benefit that they're getting from it and giving to other people. So it says, support knowledge with that. And he brings an example here of someone. He says that, mentions his name, he says he was poor and he used to sell candy. But for the fuqaha, for the scholars, he used to give them candy for free. And he says, make dua for my son. This is what it is, right? So he honors them by giving them something free. And he says, make dua for my son. He says, so the author is saying, because of his generosity and his belief and concern for his son and his effort, Allah Azza wa Jal gave him what he had asked for. That is constantly what he's saying. What does he want? He says, here, but make dua for my son. That Allah will grant him this position. He will be knowledgeable, etc., etc. So he says, because of this effort, first he was generous. He gave things for free, and what he wanted in return was dua. That make dua for my son, So he says, by that barakah of his work and what he had given, Allah Azza wa Jal gave him what his son wanted. Now he says, وَيَشْتَرِي بِالْمَالِ الْكُتُبِ وَيَسْتَكْتِبْ فَيَكُونُ عَوْنًا عَلى التَّعَلُّمِ وَالتَّفَقُّهِ. And he says he buys with his money books. وَيَسْتَكْتِبْ, and he asks the scribes also to copy them. So previously, right? If you didn't have a copy of a book, you can go to a scribe and you tell him what copy, or copiers. Copy a book for me. You can pay them and they'll copy that book for you. Today, of course, that's obsolete, right? You can just buy another copy. So he says, when you do this, you will aid in learning and in understanding this religion. So this is, subhanAllah, something to keep in mind, which is that we don't really spend money on books. Do we? No, we don't. Because why don't we spend money? Why don't we spend money on books? Why? No, but so why we don't? Why we do not spend money on books? Huh? The books are everywhere, but you still need to buy them, right? They're still, they're around us. But now today, we don't spend money on books. Huh? They're online, but not all books are online. That's true. That's what I'm getting at, because we don't read. We don't read. That's what it is. We don't really spend money on books because we really do not read. So it's not easy for you. I'm not going to ask you, right? But it's not easy, right, to go to someone's home and find a bookshelf with books on it. Maybe the bookshelf has some other things, right? Like the decorative place or whatever, but it doesn't have books. So we don't really spend money on books. So why is it? Because we really are not reading. And don't tell me it's online. Nobody goes and reads books online, huh? All right? It's online. They're waiting for me, right? I'm not going to buy anything. I'm going to save all my money because it's waiting for me online. But good luck, for you to just actually go to download that book and read it. Some of you are disciplined, you'll do it, inshallah. And it will save you some money if actually you find it and you're committed. But we need to have that. And don't think that if you spend money on few books that you're losing. Absolutely not, because it's an investment. It's an investment. And what I would want to recommend, inshallah, is that you actually start thinking, if it's not already there, you start thinking about having your own personal library. And I'm not saying, shelves and shelves, but at least one shelf. We're going to begin with one shelf. Go select the types of book that you'll need. You think, I'm going to read these books. I'm interested. Or they act as references. Okay, I can always go back to it. A book of hadith, Bukhari, Muslim. I can always go back to it and grab it and read a little bit here, a little bit there. Or a book in seerah, or a book, about Islamic history, whatever it is. But just have a small, basic Islamic library. And when you want to give people gifts, right? Especially if they're getting married. What a disappointment, right? You open the box, what did they give me? Books. Says take them back. Give them, actually, think about it, okay? If they want something else, they registered for something else, fine, give them whatever. But also consider a book. Because you do not know, right? The other things they'll use, but they're gonna eventually wear out, and then you're not gonna use them anymore. But a book, it may last them a lifetime. The benefits in them may last them a lifetime. So think about developing your own library, and then also gifting people books. Right? So you read something that is beneficial, share it with other people. And something also, it's like a trick that you can play, with your own self. Consider, if you spend some time before you go to bed, right? And you find that there are 5-10 minutes, instead of me playing with the phone, I can read, put a shelf right next to you also, right? Because if you see something interesting, you may actually be tempted, let me just grab here and say what this author is saying on page 50. Right? It doesn't need to be systematic, but at least you get a habit of, I'm just going to open a book before I go to sleep, or open a book as soon as I wake up, or on the coffee table, or right next to what I'm eating, whatever it is. Put it in a couple of strategic locations so that you will trick yourself into reading. So spend money on them, look for them. I don't think that they're expensive. And also buy and gift people books. That would be, inshallah, there'll be a lot of reward in it, bi'idhnillah azza wa jal. He says also, he recounts an incident with Muhammad ibn al-Hasan. He said, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, all of these are going to be Hanafi scholars. So Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, he had a lot of money. He said, malun kathir. At least, he had, 300 people, taking care of his business, his accounts and whatever, right? And he said he spent all of it on seeking knowledge. And he, exhausted all of his wealth in seeking knowledge and in learning. وَلَمْ يَبْقَ لَهُ ثَوْبٌ نَفِيسٌ, to the extent that he did not have remaining one single precious or expensive garment. And from a person who had so much money, to the extent that he did not have any expensive garment left. Right? So Abu Yusuf was another major Hanafi scholar. He saw him in a kind of shabby clothing, worn out clothing. فَأَرْسَلَ إِلَيْهِ ثِيَابًا نَفِيسًا, so he gifted him expensive clothes. فَلَمْ يَقْبَلْهُ, so Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, he did not accept it. قال, he says, وَلَمْ يَقْبَلْهُ وَإِنْ كَانَ قُبُولُ الْهَدِيَّةِ سُنَّةً, he says he did not accept it even though it is sunnah, to accept a gift. It's not a necessity, but he did not accept it. قال لِمَا رَأَ فِي ذَلِكَ مَذَلَّةَ نَفْسِهِ, he says maybe he thought that this was humiliating, that if I take something from somebody else, it may express or indicate need or dependence. So he rejected it. He says maybe that is the reason why he rejected that. Right? That's a possibility. And he says that the Prophet ﷺ says, لا ينبغي للمؤمن أن يذل نفسه. He says the believer should not humiliate himself. It's an authentic hadith. The continuation of that hadith, which is not mentioned here, يتعرض من البلاء لما لا يطيق. يتعرض من البلاء لما لا يطيق. Meaning he faces or he exposes himself to a bala, to a harm that he cannot tolerate. Right? Yani, in a sense, you put himself in a situation that you cannot tolerate. And then because of it, you are humiliated. Meaning you cannot withstand it. You cannot withstand the pressure. And so because of it, you're humiliated because of that. And then you start complaining and blaming others because of it. He says, you don't put yourself in a situation that's going to humiliate you. Right? So لا ينبغي أن يذل نفسه. And maybe the next incident here, can explain that if it's not clear. He says, so-and-so mentions him. He says, جمع قشور البطيخ الملقاة في مكان خال فأكلها. He says, so-and-so, who is, a scholar, he collected watermelon rinds, the skin of watermelons, right? It has a little bit of maybe some watermelon on it, like traces of it. But the watermelon rinds that were thrown away, he collected them and he was eating them, right? And it was not, he was eating them, why? Why was he eating them? Because he was what? Poor, right? He didn't have anything. So this is what he found. So he was sat there and he was eating them. So a woman saw him, or a little girl saw him, or a servant. So she told the family that she was serving that. So they made some food and they invited him to come and eat. قال فلم يقبل لهذا. So he did not accept that invitation. Right? So he did not accept that invitation. So here, wallahu a'lam, right? And pause just a little bit and then we'll continue. Here, wallahu a'lam, this is part of what a person should have of izzah, which is dignity. Not pride. So there's a difference between arrogance, pride, kibr, on the one hand, and on the one hand having izzah, dignity. So for instance, here in this particular situation, if he was a person that is arrogant, has kibr, he will say something like what? And who are you to give me? Who are you to think that you're better than me? No, I'm better than you. I'm not going to accept your invitation. So that would be what? Kibr, right? That's kibr. That's arrogance. This is haram. So kibr doesn't always necessarily have to come from the rich or the powerful. Even the poor can have kibr. Right? So this is kibr that is prohibited. It's a major sin. Izzah, dignity, on the other hand, is for the person to say, I don't want to be humiliated by accepting things from others. Right? And Rasulullah ﷺ said that the upper hand is better than the lower hand. So the upper hand is the giving hand and the lower hand is the receiving hand. He says, I don't want to be humiliated by making them think that they're doing me a favor and I'm a scholar and I'm accepting that from them, and by that I'm humiliating knowledge itself and expressing need. So I don't want to do this. I have too much dignity that I don't want to do this. So this is izzah. Izzah is allowed. Izzah is allowed in Islam for a person to distance himself from humiliating circumstances and treatment Izzah is not only allowed, Izzah is recommended. So Allah Azza wa Jal, He says Izzah belongs to Him and to His Messenger and to the believers in the Quran, right? So this is where Izzah. So Izzah is different than Kibr. So this person, when he's rejecting it, even though he's that poor, he says, no, I don't want to be a recipient. I always want to be giving. And I don't want them to think that here we have fed this scholar and whatever, right? We may be better than him. No. I want knowledge itself to be always protected and respected. No, I'm not going to take anything in return for what I'm teaching. So he says, وَهَكَذَا, and so طَالِبُ الْعِلْمِ, the seeker of knowledge should have a noble or high aspirations. And he is always aiming for the highest. لا يطمع في أموال الناس, is not greedy and is not after people's money. ولا يبخل بما عنده من المال, and he is not stingy with the money that he has. بل ينفق على نفسه وعلى غيره, but he spends on himself and on others. That is, if he has money, he spends on himself and he spends on others, meaning showing that first he does not need anybody, and if he can support himself and support other scholars or seekers of knowledge, he does that. But what is important here, it says, لا يطمع في أموال الناس. He does not seek people's money. And he'll tell you why, right? He does not seek people's money. Because when a person reaches a stage like that, people may be willing to give him. We want to give you, we want to honor you with this, we want to invite you for this. But if they see that he's after their money, then the respect that they have for him will be lost, right? And people are very, very judgmental, right? We are very, very, like in human beings in general, we're very, very judgmental, right? We're waiting for somebody to make a mistake. So if they see that you're after their money, they'll think they're better, right, than the knowledge that you have. So if a person wants to maintain the respect for ilm, he has to stay away from people's money and not show them and not be greedy for it. And he says, وَفِي الْحِكْمَةِ, in wisdom, like in reported wisdom, مَنِ اسْتَغْنَى بِمَالِ النَّاسِ افتقر. The one who is dependent or is rich because of people's money is actually poor. So whatever you are reliant on, that thing makes you poor. Right? And that's actually, it's subhanAllah, it's very wise. It's very wise. That is, if you are dependent on something, if I take that something away from you, you become poor. If I'm dependent on a particular salary, without that salary, you are poor. If you're dependent on a particular house, without it, you are poor. If you're dependent on praise, without it, you're poor. If you're not dependent on any of it, you're actually above all of that. You need it, but you're not dependent on it. You need this money, you need this. But you can survive without it, you're not poor, in need of it. The only one that you need and you cannot do without is Allah Azza wa Jal. But you say everything else can be replaced. So you're not in need of it. If I need it now, but if it goes, something else can take its place. The only one that no one can replace is Allah Azza wa Jal. So it says, if you are dependent on people's money, you're hostage to it. Just like praise. Right? It's like if I'm dependent on people's praise, I'm hostage to them. Even if I am more famous, richer, and more powerful than they are. Because without them, I'm nothing then. Like if I'm depending on them, without them, I am nothing. So I'm their hostage. Even though it looks like I'm more powerful, but in fact, no. I'm not, no. There is this exchange of power. I'm powerful because of them, but they're also powerful. They give me this power. So I need them. Otherwise, I lose my power. Right? So this is like if anybody is famous, and they're famous because of people, and they care about that, they're hostage to the audience. Right? Because they are the one who make them famous. So he says, وَالْعَالِمُ إِذَا كَانَ طَمَّعًا, and the scholar, if he's greedy, لَا يَبْقَى لَهُ حُرْمَةُ الْعِلْمِ. No, the respect of knowledge, the respect that knowledge should have, and the respect that people have for him does not remain, it vanishes. وَلَا يَقُولُ الْحَقِّ, and he does not say the truth. He cannot speak the truth. Why? Why won't he be able to speak the truth if he's greedy? Exactly, he's hostage to the provider. Because if I upset you, If I upset you, and if I tell you what the truth is, and you stop giving me, then what am I going to do? Okay? So sometimes, sometimes that's why it's important if you are, and this is, part of the wisdom, very, very subtle wisdom of the Sunnah, that is all it's recommended that if somebody gives you a gift, that you reciprocate by giving them back. And if there's nothing that you can give them, what do? At least you make dua for them. There's nothing that you can give, at least you make dua for them. So at least to even it out. You're not going to always, be able to do it, but even it out as much as possible. Why? Because if somebody has done you a favor, you're hostage to that person. Right? And if you're hostage to somebody's favor, you can't come and upset them later. You'll feel this, khunu' a little bit. You'll feel a little bit of, you'll be withdrawn, you'll be weak, and they've done me this favor. How can I upset them? How can I do this to them? And maybe there is love, maybe there is, but there's still that reluctance. Okay, because they've given me this, because they've assisted me with that. So we're not on equal footing. If we're on equal footing, you're more likely to be able to confront them with the truth and say this and that. So of course, if somebody provides for you, if somebody helps you, of course, you're not going to be able to tell them this is wrong, or you're supposed to do this. So then that person, the truth that he has will be compromised, and then no one will respect him. Because they say, okay, we know this is wrong, why aren't you saying anything about it? And he says, وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ لَا يَرْجُوا إِلَّا مِنَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى وَلَا يَخَافَ إِلَّا مِنْهُ. He says he is supposed to hope only from Allah and only fear Him. And that really ultimately is why you're learning everything. You're not learning everything basically so that you would know Salah has these conditions and these obligations and these recommendations and this invalidates it, and okay, what after? What are you learning all of this for? If we sit here and learn it, these are the obligations of Salah, the arkan, and the pillars of Salah, the obligations of Salah, recommendations of Salah, the invalidations of Salah. Why are you learning all of this? Why? Of course, right? To reach the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal, right? But I want to take it a step by step. So you're learning all of these things to do what with them? To perfect Salah. Not just to memorize it, to actually pray. Right? So that your Salah will be better. And so this is leading you to Salah. So why you're praying? To please Allah Azza wa Jal. So when you learn about zakah, why you're learning about zakah? This is the percentage, this is how much you pay, this is when you're supposed to pay. There's zakah for this, there's zakah for that. Just to know it? No, because you want to pay your zakah. And when you pay your zakah, then you're supposed to get something from it. That is purification for yourself and your money. Lillah Azza wa Jal. So all of it, all your knowledge, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, it doesn't matter what discipline, it doesn't matter where you start, it all goes back to the same common area, or I guess it's a common point, which is أَلَا يَرْجُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَلَا يَخَافَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. You only hope from Allah and you only fear Allah Azza wa Jal. قال فمن عصى الله تعالى خوفا من المخلوق فقد خاف غير الله. If you disobey Allah Azza wa Jal because you're afraid of other people more than Allah, then you've disobeyed Allah. Disobeyed Allah in terms of disobedience, and disobeyed Allah Azza wa Jal in terms of you have feared somebody more than fearing Allah Azza wa Jal. That in your mind at that particular moment, you have not equated them with Allah. Okay, that would be shirk. You're not equated them with Allah. You feel that, they know what is inside my heart. That's shirk in Allah. That's not supposed to happen to any person who is a believer. But at that particular moment, you're aware of the harm that they can give to you, but you're not conscious and aware of Allah Azza wa Jal. So that's a weakness of Iman. And whenever we commit a sin, we also do it because we love that sin, or what's going to bring us, more than we love Allah Azza wa Jal. So again, we're not really equating it with Allah, but at that particular moment, we are weak and closer to that sin. So if a person disobeys Allah because he had feared somebody else other than Allah, this is a disobedience. فإذا لم يعص الله تعالى لخوف مخلوق وراقب حدود الشرع فلم يخف غير الله بل خاف الله. So if he did not disobey Allah Azza wa Jal because of fearing somebody, and he is observing the commands of the Allah Azza wa Jal, then he will not going to be afraid of anyone but Allah Azza wa Jal. and so when he hopes. So this happens when a person's iman is strong. And this happens when a person is constantly nurturing his own iman, so that in moments of even weakness, he is not so weak as to commit these particular sins, or fear somebody else more than Allah Azza wa Jal, or love somebody else more than Allah, even during moments of weakness. So he'll try his best, right? Then he skips to something else and so on. So he says, وَيَنْبَغِي لِطَالِبِ الْعِلْمِ أَنْ يَعُدَّ وَيُقَدِّرَ لِنَفْسِهِ تَقْدِيرًا فِي التِّكْرَارِ فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَسْتَقِرُّ قَلْبُهُ حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ ذَلِكَ الْمَبْلَغِ. He says the seeker of knowledge should, estimate and design for himself a particular repetition of whatever he had memorized. Remember we talked about this last time, that you're going to memorize something or study something, and when you study this particular thing, you're going to memorize it sufficient number of times for it to settle in your heart. So he comes back to it and he says, estimate how many times you need to repeat this particular thing, because it's not going to settle in your heart until you reach that estimate of yours, whether it's 100 times, 200 times, 500 times, whatever it is, until you really remember it and really have memorized it. And he gives, sort of a recommendation. So he says, Talibul ilm, the seeker of knowledge, supposed to repeat the lesson of yesterday 5 times, and the lesson of the day before it 4 times, and the lesson of the day before that 3 times, and the one before it 2 times, and the one before it is 1 time, because this is more likely that he would remember it. So this is what he's talking about. And this is also the same when you memorize in Quran. You memorize whatever you memorized today, but also you repeat what you memorized yesterday and connect it. And what you memorized before that, and you connect it. So that's what he's talking about. Once you finish what you have memorized today, you don't leave it. So tomorrow there's something new. But tomorrow I'm repeating the new, connecting it with the old. And the one before, and the one before, and the one before, and so on. So that every day, right, this new thing, for instance, that I've memorized today, tomorrow I'm repeating it 5 times, the day after 4 times, the day after 3 times, the day after 2 times, the day after 1 time. And see, if this helps, good. If not, you can do it even more, depending on how much you are memorizing or how much you are studying. So that is his recommendation. And he says, وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ لَا يَعْتَادَ الْمَخَافَةَ فِي التِّكْرَارِ, meaning don't hesitate to repeat. Don't be too weak to keep repeating until you actually grasp what you need to grasp, because when you do it with enough energy, then you'll be able, inshallah, to retain more from it. And it's difficult, of course, to repeat, because learning something new is always attractive. I don't want to go back and repeat what I've learned yesterday. I want to just focus on something new, and I want to jump even ahead. But he's saying, no, give yourself the chance to actually perfect what you've learned yesterday. So no, don't. So if let's say for instance that you have estimated or you planned for yourself half a page. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to memorize. So half a page, and this half a page, I'm not going to go beyond it until it is perfected. Even if the second page seems attractive, I'm not going there until I perfect this. Because tomorrow is going to come, inshallah, and for tomorrow I have the second page. But now this is my assignment. So you perfect this particular assignment. And you try and you push yourself to review. Because with review, you'll remember more. And he says, وَلَا يَجْهَرُ جَهَرًا يَجْهَدُ نَفْسَهُ. He says, and when you're doing it, when you're repeating, when you're trying to memorize, don't be too loud as to exhaust yourself, but seek a middle path, where you can hear what you're saying, but not too loud as to exhaust yourself, and so that you'll quit in the middle. فَخَيْرُ الْأُمُورِ أَوْسَاطُهَا. The best of matters are what exists in the middle. Naam. And he says here, he mentions from Abu Yusuf, rahimahullah, that he used to study and, argue, in argument in a sense of studying. يذاكر المذاكرة with the scholars, and he had a lot of energy. And when they asked him, he says, how is it that you can do it with so much energy? He says, I've been hungry for 5 days, but I still have that energy. I still have that energy. And maybe this, wallahu a'lam, comes from repetition. Maybe this comes from the fact that he loves what he's doing. Maybe this comes from the fact that there's barakah, even though he does not have enough. But subhanAllah, Allah had put in his body the barakah that he'll able to continue even though he did not eat enough. Maybe a lot of reasons, and maybe all of them, right? One, he just got into the habit of doing it. And the other one, he just loves something. And you know that when you love something, somehow you find the energy to do it, even though you don't really have a lot. But you find the energy to do it, or maybe Allah Azza wa Jal had blessed him. So he says you try to push yourself, despite obstacles, to be able to review and study. And he says, recommends, and this is important, he says, لا ينبغي أو ينبغي أن لا يكون لطالب العلم فترة فإنها آفة. He says the seeker of knowledge should not disconnect or have a hiatus or a break or long break from studying, because it is a disease. He says, so and so we used to say, إنما غلبت شركائي, I was distinguished from among my companions in knowledge, or distinguished in knowledge, because I did not have a long break when I was studying. So it's okay, of course, to have a short break, because you're human and you're going to get bored, you're going to get tired. So if you're studying, let's say for instance, whether it's reading, any type of study, any type of reading, you will deserve at least once a week, let's say once a week, a break when you're doing something else, so you can come back and be energized to pursue knowledge after that break. But what he's saying is that don't make this break too long. Okay, what's wrong with it if it's too long? You're going to forget. So that's one thing. You're going to forget whatever you were learning. So that's a problem, forgetfulness. What? You lose momentum. You lose that routine that you've developed. So now you know that, okay, when I want to study, I'll wake up in the morning, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do that. If you break it as a habit, it's really hard to restore that habit back. So that's why you can have a break, but not a very long break, because you always want to maintain that habit. And you can find creative ways within the day, right? If it's not, one of your break days, and if you're still bored, you can find, and he'll talk about something inshallah, but you can find creative ways of studying whatever you want to study, where you can change the location, you can change the time, you can study with a partner, right? You can study in a different way. You can find a way. But just don't have a very long break, because as you said, the routine will be broken. And then once that is done, then how are you going to restore it? So, it's good for a person to, if you are used to reading, to continue to read every day. Even when you're traveling. Or if you have a habit of reading the Quran, even if you're traveling, to never break that habit, to always have your mushaf with you or it's on your device. And you're always reading, whatever your habit was, even if you have to decrease, right? Like in safar, right, when you're traveling, what happens with your salah? You shorten the salah, and even if you need it, you combine it, but you don't leave your salah, right? So that tells you, of a way to maintain. So you maintain it, not at the same level, but you're still maintaining it. So if you had a habit